All right then, step 7. How does our little story fit into the bigger story? That's the question. Well, obviously, it happens as the mighty men and all Israel support David, he does take the land. But as the story goes on, they also lose the land. But this idea here, as the Lord promised, this ties us in to the big story, doesn't it? You read this word, as the Lord promised, you think when? When did the Lord promise? Well, I think with the promise we're thinking of goes right back to Abraham. So we're seeing that the Lord has promised to Abraham that through him and his people, they will rule the land and bring a blessing to the world. Now it's interesting. We know that promise is finally fulfilled in who? Jesus, the great son of David. I think this is a key verse, Romans 4:13. Paul understands that promise to Abraham way back. He understands it as a promise that Abraham would be an heir of the world, not just the promised land. Paul understands it as something bigger, that Abraham would be an heir of the world. And that's what we see in Jesus, isn't it? That's as we look at the big story, that's what we see in Jesus. The promise to Abraham fulfilled in Jesus, David's great son, that he would rule the world. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, says Jesus. Therefore go and make disciples. Okay, so this is a way that it fits into the bigger story. Themes. What themes do we see? God to Israel. What do we see? Well, God's faithful. Keeps his promise. Israel to God. Well, I think we see that they are courageously supporting the Davidic king, God's king. So as we see, Israel is courageously supporting God's king and extending his rule, helping to extend his rule. That's what we see, extending the kingship. Land was very important. The promise is fulfilled. King David takes the land as promised. And finally, leadership. We see the great Davidic king reigning along with his people. But we also see that some of his people will stand up and be particularly significant in taking the kingdom, in establishing the kingdom. These mighty men. All Israel was involved, but these mighty men sort of stand up and distinguish themselves in this great work of God's kingdom. I hope that's kind of clear. How does it contribute to our understanding of the gospel? Well, this has really kind of surprised me, I think, in a sense. I've written this. God extends his promised rule, his reign, over all the world through Jesus, the Davidic king. So God extends his promised reign over all the world through Jesus, the Davidic king, and through those who support him. I think that's the message we're getting here, isn't it? That David's rule is extended. Not just as God promised, not just by David, but also by those who support him, loyally support the king. Isn't it the same with the gospel? All authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, you guys, go, make disciples, spread my rule. I think that's what I got from this. So that's step 7. Let's see if we can do step 8. Let's try and do that alone. Take a few minutes to try to tie it all together.